Welcome to the Thoroughly Wrong Project with Lalo and Bob. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. Let's jump right into that weekly dose of things you can disagree with. Take it away, guys.
All right, good morning and welcome to the Thoroughly Wrong Project. It's a Sunday morning here in Bakersfield, California, nice and foggy. How you doing, Lalo?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good.
Oh, all right.
Can't complain.
Can't complain? All right, man. You know what? Our show, we got lucky, bud. Our show today features a man, Mr. Jack Kammer, and he's an author, a radio host, an activist, and you know what? Most interesting, he's a counter feminist social worker. I don't know what that means, but we're all going to find out. Welcome to the show, Jack.
Thank you, Bob.
Hey, man.
I love to talk about what a counter feminist social worker is.
Yeah, that was the thing. I have to ask, dude, what exactly is a counter feminist? And at the risk of all the emails I'm going to get about this, what does that have to do with being a social worker, man?
Okay, very good. Let's not even worry about the emails, that you're going to get because, some people just like to squawk, right? Squeaky wheels get the grease. They've gotten a lot of grease by squeaking, and so they're going to keep squeaking.
Right.
And they're going to try to shut you down. They've tried to shut me down. So forget about it. Let them squeak. It's almost an indication of how on point we are when they feel the need to say, we can't let them say that.
Right. That's I don't worry too much about it. In fact, I secretly like it, Jack.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I don't mind it either. And I'm retired, so I have an advantage over a lot of folks who think like me, who can't speak up as much as I can because they got jobs. And if they work in academia, for instance, or in government, where they have to be very politically correct, they're ducking for cover. They're in their foxholes. But I'm retired, and they can't try to have me fired or take away my government funding because I don't have any.
All right on, brother.
All right. So you want to know what a counter feminist social worker is?
Yeah, and may I clarify? This counter feminism is not anti-feminism, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
An anti-feminist says no. That's a bunch of baloney. What you women are saying is a bunch of baloney. You've never had any problems. You're all just little powder puffs who were treated special. You're on a pedestal. You don't have any problems. It's all a bunch of baloney. That's an anti-feminist. They say no. I say, as a counter-feminist, I say, yeah, and. Yes, and.
All right.
You've got problems. Men have got problems. Let's talk about that. Let's try to work something out between us. It should have been a negotiation, but it wasn't. It was a shakedown. Go ahead. Did you want to say something? I heard a breath.
No. I just laughed because it was a shakedown, brother. I believe that.
Yeah. And it's still going on. It's still going on. Here's the way I think we need to understand how things got so off the rails with trying to have happy men and happy women working together. Betty Friedan is generally credited with starting the modern feminist movement with her book, I think it was 1962, called The Feminine Mystique. And in that book, she described the problem that has no name. And a lot of women related to it. Especially, white middle class, upper middle class women who were educated and were lucky enough to be able to stay at home if they wanted to. But a lot of women felt after a few years of that, well, this is great. I love being a mother. I love taking care of my kids. I love having a house that I can try to make a home. But, it's not everything I want. I'd like to do more. That was the problem that had no name. And women who dared to speak up about this were often shamed for not wanting to fulfill their natural God-given role as a mother. And there was a lot of shame involved. But, women said, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want more. I'm glad to be a mother, but I don't want to be just a mother. And in that book, 1962, Betty Friedan, The Feminine Mystique, she was pretty sympathetic to men as well. As a matter of fact, in her book, she referenced a 1962, no, I think her book was 63. She referenced a 1962 Red Book magazine article. You know that magazine? It's a women's magazine.
Yeah, yeah.
1962 Red Book magazine article called Why Young Husbands Feel Trapped. In Red Book magazine, she referenced that article approvingly in her book, making the point that, it's not a bed of roses for men either. So, there was plenty of room for improvement on both sides. And it's not the way it happened. We should have gotten together and said, hey, I understand that you women would, like to get out of the house more and be away from the kids more and work more and earn more money out of the house. That's great, because I would love to get out of this office building, get the burden of having to make all the money off my shoulders. And I sure as hell would like to spend more time with my kids. Let's work something out. Should have been a negotiation, should have been a trade. Instead, in 1965, I believe it was, a group of women in New York called the Red Stockings issued what they called the Red Stockings Manifesto. These women called themselves the Red Stockings. They issued the Red Stockings Manifesto. And the long and the short of the Red Stockings Manifesto is that women are oppressed and their oppression is total, and they identify men as their oppressors.
Oh.
So,
yeah,
perfect excuse, if you can sell that idea by pointing to, various facts, you cherry pick your facts, women earn less money than men. Okay, men have more heart attacks earning money. Let's not just talk about the ways in which women are adversely affected by what's going on between men and women. Let's talk about how it impacts both of us. We have an ecosystem here.
right.
And you can't just change one piece of the ecosystem and expect it to thrive. And I think we've seen that it hasn't. So women are oppressed. Their oppression is total, and they identify men as their oppressors. So what's so good about this strategy that the Red Stockings adopted? Well, in this day and age that we're in, of respecting all points of view and listening to your stakeholders and valuing your partners and seeking diverse opinions and points of view and seeking the win-win. That's pretty strong ethos right now in the world, and I think it's a pretty good one. But that would have required the Red Stockings to say, maybe our oppression isn't total, and maybe men aren't just our oppressors. Maybe we do some bad things that cause problems for them too. But they didn't want to talk to men. They didn't want to give. They wanted to get. They wanted to take. And that's where the shakedown came from. When you're talking about your oppressors, you don't have to negotiate with your oppressors. What you want to do with your oppressors and what you can feel justified to doing to your oppressors is in one form or another killing them, silencing them, completely disempowering them, shutting them up, shaming them, changing them, making them wrong. And that's what's happened over the past 50 or 60 years. I don't think that the feminist movement has been entirely bad, but I don't think it's been entirely good. And one of the things I like to say is, that the most sexist idea of all is the idea that only one sex is ever sexist. That would be men, you and me, Bob and Lalo.
Right.
And only one sex is ever harmed by women, is ever harmed by sexism. And that would be the Red Stockings. That's a very sexist idea, that only men are sexist. Women are never sexist. It's crazy. And so another piece of this is the back of the T-shirt. This is what I put on the back of the T-shirt. Feminism is only 50% correct. If you don't understand that, you're 100% wrong. And most people don't understand that. And so we've been following this merry path of what red stocking style feminists have wanted to do. And they've pretty much taken over. You know, the Betty Friedan's of the world who are, you know, friendly to men, they're sort of few and far between, and they get shut up too. They get silenced too. They're told they're not really women. They're not really sisters. You know, there's a saying among women, there is a cold place in hell. There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women.
Right.
So, you know, it's groupthink, where women are together believing what they want to believe and thinking what they want to think and thinking only about themselves. And groupthink, there was a book published years ago by a psychologist, often results in very bad decisions. It also includes demonization of the out-group. You know, there's the in-group and the out-group in groupthink. Men are the out-group. We are the other. We are, groupthink often results in the out-group being demonized, being dehumanized, and acted against in cruel ways. Okay, so.
Well, wait, just a second. You know, this Betty, she seems like a negotiator, which is what we need. It's what we need.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
but in our culture, and I don't know how far back it goes, but it seems like we have this tactic of declaring war on things that we perceive wrong. So why do you think that is? Why do we silence people who want to negotiate? Because if you have a group of people and half the group feels oppressed, and you have one person that says, hey, let's talk about this, and you have a couple people that say, hey, no, let's declare war on our oppressors. Why do we think like that? Why can't we? We've done it with drugs. We've done it with poverty. We've done it with economic status. We've done it with feminism. And the list goes on and on and on of people who stand up and say, you're oppressing me. It's time to declare war on you. Why do we do that, Jack?
Because it works sometimes. It doesn't work in every situation. I mean, you know, if you take a look at management labor negotiations, union negotiations with big corporations, sometimes they get really ugly. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they cooperate. The union says, look, we got some ideas about how to make your companies more efficient, and we want a raise because your profits are going up. You know,
right.
That's a good negotiation. You know, but the other kinds of negotiation are very much ideological. And I have to tell you this, Bob, I think that a lot of the polarization that we see in America and in other countries around the world really has its roots in I don't know that we could say it's gender or sex groupings, but there are two very, very distinct and separate ideologies in the world. I mean, you know, if you think about it, it takes two people to get together to make a baby. Why is that? Because going from 1 to 2 is the easiest and simplest way of increasing the inputs, so that there's a good chance that the inputs will be that the strongest input will be able to prevail. So, you know, there are two basic ideas in politics: liberalism and conservatism. Is one good and one bad? No. Did you ever listen to Hardball with Chris Matthews on the television? He was fond of talking about the Republicans as the daddy party, the Democrats as the mommy party.
Right.
He didn't make up that idea. It was a fellow named Jan Wisniewski or something like that back in the day. He came up with that idea. But Matthews was fond of it, and he understood politics. So, you know, I think there's something to it. And if you think about it, what's the fundamental difference? What's the fundamental difference between Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives? To me, it's connected to the answer I got from a psychiatrist friend of mine years ago when I was over at his house having dinner. And I said, In your work with your patients, do you see any basic distinctions, basic differences between men and women? And he immediately said, oh, yeah. I said, well, what do you see? He said, women focus on what people need. Men focus on what people deserve and earn. And that seems to me to be pretty much lining up with the Republicans and the Democrats, the liberals and the conservatives. You know, it's and husbands and wives. And right now in Washington, D.C., you got the mommy party and the daddy party, and they hate each other. We have a dysfunctional marriage, and the kids are going crazy.
You say that again.
So, you know, the way it ought to work is a Democrat comes along and says, hey, I want to propose a bill because I want to do something to help these people who are in need. To focus on the need. The Republican says, all right, you know, I'll listen to that. Maybe that's a good idea, but you're going to have to do something for me. You're going to need to write into your bill, and I'm happy to work with you on this. You're going to need to write into your bill a way of making sure that helping people with this need does not in any way serve to perpetuate or amplify, magnify, diversify their neediness. Yeah, let's help them. What are we going to do to end the need? Now, there are some situations where even a Republican, even a hardcore Republican, I think very correctly, hears that there are people in the country who got wiped out by a tornado. You know?
Right.
And so, of course, a good person, any good person, Republican or Democrat, is going to say, oh, we got to help those people. And you don't have to worry about that perpetuating their need because they didn't have anything to do with that tornado blowing their house down. You know? So if you think about it also, it makes sense in a family. And that, you know, evolutionarily, male psychology and female psychology became distinct, not enemies, but distinct. You know, again, the idea of two ideas, two ways of looking at a problem are better than one. You know, if a baby was born, and you know let's think back in the day when we were a little band of hominids, humans walking across the grasslands of Africa, you know, trying not to get extinct, being eaten by saber-toothed tigers. If a baby was born in that little band and the man said, he doesn't deserve anything, he hasn't earned anything, he doesn't get anything, that would be crazy because the baby hasn't done anything.
Right.
Can't earn, can't deserve. So it's important that we have a person involved in the situation who says, we got to take care of this baby's needs. We don't think about what this baby deserves. We got to take care of this baby's needs. And of course, a good man is going to say, yeah, of course, I'm with you on that. But if, you know, the baby is getting to be 6, 7, 8, even 1 day old is not too early for the man to at least begin sizing up opportunities for helping the baby grow and thrive and be strong and independent. It's not going to be independent, you know, in the first couple of years, but ways to start preparing the child, teaching the child, demonstrating to the child that this is what you do as an adult. You help take care of other people's needs. That's a healthy marriage. And when the father and the mother hate each other, when the father and the mother are suspicious of each other, I mean, you know, a Republican who doesn't want to quote unquote help people, you know, by giving them whatever they need is, right. Oh, you're so cruel and heartless. You're so mean and heartless. You don't care about people. Well, and then the Republican says, you are just a knee-jerk liberal. you're part of the nanny state, and it gets ugly from there. But I think that, the basic problem is that we can't bring ourselves to say, okay, I get your point. You're going to need to get mine. We're going to talk about this. And somehow that broke down. And I think maybe political operatives, of whom feminists are some very good ones, sort of mastered that. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to make you look bad so that we don't have to talk to you. So we're going to get more votes than you. We're going to characterize you as a scumbag, as a mean, heartless person, as a cruel person. And of course, the Republicans try to do the same things with the Democrats. You're a lily-livered liberal who just wants to give away the farm, We need to have the courage to say, you're right. And so am I.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing right there. We need to have the courage to say, you're absolutely right. You're also wrong. I'm right and I'm wrong. Let's work together on this.
Exactly. It's courage and humility.
Yeah. And patience.
Yes. Yes. All of those things that men, by the way, are supposedly devoid of.
Only since 1965, Jack.
Yeah, I know. They've done an amazing thing since 1965. You got to hand it to them. I mean, they're good at what they do. I don't think it's a particularly good thing that they do, but they're good at it. They're very professional. They're very effective, very cynical too, if you ask me. And it's a mess.
Yeah, the feminist movement in the 70s was very, very cynical, very small-minded, very mean. And I remember I grew up in that era. I was a teenager in the 70s, and I came of age in the the age of Gloria Steinem and all the television shows, when the television changed over from like All in the Family to Maude, and it became this anti-man kind of culture, but it didn't take off right away. But the further it goes, the worse it got. And it put me in a place of growing up in, instead of becoming angry though, I became more empathetic, and then I became overly empathetic, and then I had to fucking go to therapy because I was too empathetic. So I get what you're saying. I'm just sitting here with my mouth open, like, yeah, that was what happened to me for sure.
Yeah. So Maud comes up for you. What comes up for me is a greeting card from Hallmark. It was actually the shoebox division of Hallmark, but it was Hallmark. And Hallmark is the company that likes to say that it's the company that helps us all learn to express our deepest and most loving thoughts and express how much we care. Well, what comes up for me is the Hallmark card that showed on the front a stylish woman who's saying, there's a little word bubble above her head, who's saying, "Men are scum." This is Hallmark. Open the card, and inside it says, "Oh, excuse me. For a second there, I was feeling generous." There you go. And, and we're off to the races.
No punches pulled there.
Yeah. And so, at the same time we're hearing how men have to respect women, we're hearing them say men are scum, and they're sending it to each other for a yuck.
Right. And as you do that, what you don't do, you're psychologically building this case against men where you want them to be kinder, you want them to be more empathetic, you want them to be more understanding, and then you're building a coalition with your friends that men are scum.
Yeah. So, it's a good news, bad news joke. Women want us to be more sensitive, and they want us to talk more, but I'm a little cynical here. They want us to be more sensitive to them. not to ourselves.
Right.
Be more sensitive to them and talk more, but don't tell them anything they don't want to hear. Don't say, hey, I think that you're wrong here and that we should do it a different way. No, just agree with me. Tell me how wonderful I am. And that's not going to work. Why do men not talk? Well, probably very tightly connected with the question, why don't men listen? Why don't women listen? Why don't they listen to what we really want to say? Because a lot of men have the experience of saying what's really on their minds and in their hearts and getting the response, oh, I can't believe you feel that way.
It keeps us off balance, Jack.
Yes, which is very much part of the strategy of keeping us weak.
Yeah, where you tell, this is the thing, and please don't misunderstand me that I'm attacking anyone here, but in my life I have faced time and time again where you try to be more understanding and you try to be more empathetic, and then you get to the place where you don't know what you're doing, and then you get attacked again by saying you never take charge of the situation. I'm always having to make the decisions here, and you're just like, what the hell do you want?
Yeah.
And it's nobody's. I'm not saying it's anybody's fault, but it's the times that we live in that we simply just attack each other constantly. And as you know, the divorce rate skyrocketed in the 60s and the 70s, and nowadays the only thing that's shoved at us constantly is communicate with each other, and then they don't tell us how to fucking do it.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that the key from the male side of the equation is to stand up and say, you're not going to like this. And frankly, I don't care, because I don't like thinking that I can't say it.
Right.
We don't do that. There's a saying about the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Women are very, very, very psychologically powerful.
Yes, they are.
And,
as they should be. As they should be.
Well, that's fine. And men should be psychologically powerful too, because we both have good human brains. And men are often very afraid. We are also, I think, ashamed because we have drunk some of the Kool-Aid that we are scum, we are pigs, we are dogs, we are cavemen, we are Neanderthals. We've drunk some of that, and we've drunk some of the Kool-Aid that says women create life. They don't create life. They gestate life, but it's the zygote, it's the sperm and the egg together that create the life. We think of women as angels, and sometimes they are. And men are often thought of as devils, and sometimes we are. But, just as we should not say that God is a he, we shouldn't say the devil is a he either. But we do, and nobody's saying we shouldn't.
Right. Oh, that's wow. Okay. I just thought of that T-shirt that it's refers to God as a woman. And now I'm thinking, well, Satan could be a woman too. So sure.
Yeah,
so Lalo.
I wanted to go back when he brought up the whole
Lalo,
like
can you
Hallmark
talk up a little bit more? Or
can you hear me better?
A little bit. Go ahead.
Like your whole when you were talking about like the Hallmark card and the men are scum, and it kind of just seems very like blunt and like in your face and harsh. But I wanted to ask you, why do you think, and I wasn't alive back then when you guys were talking about like the feminist movement in like the 70s and the 60s and the 80s. But why do you think they came on, like the movement was so, quote unquote harsh? Like, why do you think that sentiment came about? Like, where did that sentiment come from in your idea, or in your opinion?
Yes. So here's how it looks to me. When Betty Friedan was writing her book, and we had an ecosystem, the ecosystem basically had two parts, You had the male domain and the female domain. Now, we don't talk much about the female domain because domain suggests domination and that suggests power. And of course, women have no power because they're completely and totally oppressed. But it was there. They just didn't want to talk about it. So we had a male domain where there were a lot of good things. You could earn money. You could have an interesting job. You could have an interesting career. You could feel like you were doing something valuable. Okay, that's the male domain. The female domain that women very well knew about but didn't want to include in the equation is I get to stay home. I don't have a boss breathing down my neck. I am the queen of this little teeny tiny company. I'm the queen of this domain. I'm the boss of this little family in social relations. I could tell you about an interesting thing that Phyllis Schlafly said about that. Maybe I should at this point. If you give me a second, I can give you the exact. Yeah, I can call up this little file here. This thing that Phyllis Schlafly said in her book, The Power of the Positive Woman. Lalo, you won't know this, but Bob, you know who Phyllis Schlafly was.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to say it or you want me to say it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So Phyllis Schlafly was a very smart woman. I think she was a lawyer. And interestingly enough, she was a woman who opposed the Equal Rights Amendment. She led the opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment, which was, do you know about that, Bob?
No.
Lalo? Okay, Lalo probably doesn't know it either. It was an effort to put into the U.S. Constitution an Equal Rights Amendment, which basically said there shouldn't be any differences in the way we treat people because of their sex. Now, of course, that was entirely focused on the bad ways in which we treat women because of their sex. There wasn't much talk about how we would have to change things for men because of the bad things we do to men because of their sex. But she was the primary opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment. Her basic idea was if men and women were treated equally, that would mean women have less power, not more. Okay. Because her book was called The Power of the Positive Woman. Here's a segment from her book. Her book was 1977, The Power of the Positive Woman. She's telling the story of a hoodwinked husband. This is the hoodwinked husband talking. He says, when my wife and I were married, we agreed that I would make all the major decisions and she would make the minor ones. I decide what legislation Congress should pass, what treaties the president should sign, and whether the United States should stay in the United Nations. My wife makes the minor decisions, such as how we spend our money, whether I should change my job, where we should live, and where we go on our vacations. Okay, now that focuses on the little domain that women have a lot of power in.
Right.
Now, if we think of the big domain that men were operating in back in the day, you could think of it as a huge, huge pyramid. And, our eyes just inexorably get drawn to the top of this pyramid. Like, wow, look how high that is. Look at how tall that is. Wow, it's amazing. Oh, and look, it's all men up there. Oh, that's not fair. We very seldom look down at the base of the pyramid and say, wow, look at all the men down there. And we certainly don't look at the men in the basement shoveling the coal. So yes, men have an opportunity to be powerful in a very, very big power structure, but it's a very small chance that they're going to get there. Women, on the other hand, have a very good chance of being at the top of a very small power structure. Some men would like to have that option too. Some women would like to have the option to risk it all and, go full tilt to being, a big shot CEO. And women right now have those options. Men don't. For the most part, we don't. We're still sort of stuck there.
We don't what?
Feeling lucky because it's a man's world, and you're stuck in some cruddy job. You might be in a middle management job where you got bosses upon bosses upon bosses beating down on each other, and eventually it gets to you. And so then you get the luxury of beating on your people and having them hate you. And, that's not exactly the most fulfilling way to live your life. We need to be able to say, okay, you want access to this situation? We get that because there are some good things over here in corporate land, and having your own little contracting company and running around town in a pickup truck with paint buckets and ladders in the back, trying to hustle jobs. There's some benefit to that, but after 80 hours a week, it's a little much. And so maybe, we have a problem that has no name too. I mean, you call it male privilege, but that's not a good name for this. And so, if you'd like to get out of the house, we'd like to get back in. Let's work out a deal. Let's work out a deal. And it didn't happen. So, okay, so Lalo was asking what's motivating this meanness on the part of women. I think it is because women want to defend their turf. They want to defend their female domain. Men did it too. We were not terribly happy about saying to women, oh yeah, you want to be a member of our bricklayers union? Sure, come on over. No, we had something good and we weren't particularly fond of sharing it with women, but we eventually said, okay, all right. And also laws were passed that required us to do it. Okay, come on over. We'll try to do our best to treat you as equals over here. But women saw that inexorably men were going to sort of be looking in their direction. And women were thinking, wait a second, do we really want equality? Do we really want to share this great thing that we have where we get to be queens of our little domains? Hell no. No, we don't want a negotiation. We don't want a trade. We don't want a win-win. We want a win-lose. We want it all.
Of course.
The best defense is a strong offense. So the best way to defend the female domain is to attack, demean men, and make it very acceptable in polite company to talk about how horrible men are. It's not really their fault, but they have that nasty testosterone stuff, talk about how horrible men are and to emphasize all of the stereotypes that serve to keep us out of their domain. What's the number one stereotype that keeps us out of their domain? Men are violent. Which is why I think hundreds of millions of dollars, it's about $500 million a year every year that goes to the Violence Against Women Act. $500 million a year just in the United States. $500 million a year for the Violence Against Women Act. And do you know what the science shows? You know what the research consistently shows? Is that domestic violence is essentially a 50-50 proposition. Now, in the interest of being a good, honest, respectable person and something of a researcher myself, I have to acknowledge right away that in those cases of domestic violence where there is severe physical violence, women are more likely to be hurt than men are. Women are more likely to be killed than men are. But most domestic violence is not severe. It does not result in severe physical injury. And when women want to cause severe physical injury, it's not just their fists. They can use weapons. They can use poisons. They can push you down the steps when you're not looking. They can attack you when you're asleep. The research consistently shows that domestic violence is a 50-50 proposition for the most part Most of it is mutual combat, but women will initiate it slightly more than men do. But still, we are violent. And because we are violent, we can't have a rebuttable presumption for joint custody, for instance, in the event of a divorce, because it endangers women and children. That's what they say. It endangers women and children. So, they've asked us to take stock of our stereotypes of them. Boy, it's a shakedown because they ain't taking stock of their stereotypes of us. They're amplifying them, magnifying them, and trading on them, using them in very mean and cynical, and one might even say cruel ways.
Jack, I do have one issue with what we're doing here. And you started it off when you said in the 60s that it was mainly white women in middle class. We are, and I'm not saying we're marginalizing, but we're not talking about the other half of the population, which is women of color. I don't see women of color fitting into this idea or this ideology that we're talking about. They have a completely different culture that we're not delving into here. And I know we don't have the time because this issue could go on for, hours and hours.
We need to make the time. And let's start with that, because the title of this podcast is Thoroughly Wrong.
The Thoroughly Wrong Project.
And that's really what I want to talk about. Now, isn't it interesting, Bob? Isn't it interesting that you, as a good man who's trying to be balanced and fair and thinking about everybody, isn't it interesting how you didn't mention black men?
Yeah.
Black men, like black women, face two, it's called intersectionality nowadays. You've heard that phrase?
Yeah, definitely.
Intersectionality. Okay. So, think of the two dimensions of being black and being female. Disadvantages to both.
Oh, wow. I never thought of that, dude.
And
the black and female, we hear about a lot, but black and male, and we demonize that.
Yes.
The black man. And
yes.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yes, exactly. And look, okay. I went to social work school primarily because I could see the double whammy that black men were getting. So you're in California. Mm-hmm. Are you in a big city in California?
Bakersfield.
Okay, Bakersfield. I don't know what it's like in Bakersfield, but in Baltimore, where I live, and up and down the East Coast, every place I've asked this question, excuse me, I got to take a quick sip. Up and down the East Coast, black men often hear, black men ain't shit. Now, guess what? They're not hearing that from the Ku Klux Klan. They're not hearing it because they're black, because they're hearing it from other blacks. They are hearing it because they are black and male. And the double whammy of being black and male in a milieu where everyone is focused on the disadvantages of being female and the supposed advantages of being male, when as a black male, you ain't got any of those advantages, or very few.
Right.
And so when I saw the title of your podcast, Thoroughly Wrong, I thought, yep, perfect. What I want to talk about is how thoroughly wrong our social policy has been over the past 50, 60 years. Because at just about the same time that the women's movement arose, the civil rights movement was happening too. And things were getting better for Black America, even with Jim Crow happening. Even with Jim Crow and all its ugliness, things were improving for Black America. Not as fast as it should have, of course. But things were improving. But then along came, and then the civil rights movement came along, and MLK was a very inspirational person. His holiday is tomorrow. Said a lot of really good and inspirational things. The civil rights movement was helping. But then along came the feminist movement. And at the same time, along came the war on poverty. And to my way of thinking, the war on poverty has not been won.
No.
And in the war on poverty, men and fathers were collateral damage that nobody really cares about. You know, the idea, it's not still true, but it used to be true, that in the war on poverty, a woman with kids couldn't get money from the war on poverty if there was a man in the house. She had to get rid of the man. And so what does that do to the man? And then what does feminism do to the man when companies who are trying to be socially conscious get credit for how many women they're hiring, especially minority women, and no credit for how many minority men they're hiring, or half credit, let's say. And then at the same time, jobs right and left are collapsing in big cities. Companies are moving to the suburbs. The bus lines aren't getting people there. It's, you know, things got very rough in the male domain, especially for Black men. And we don't want to talk about that. And we need to talk about that. I was a parole and probation agent in central Baltimore for a year. There is a lot of pain in these guys. Look, some of these guys are bad guys, and I'm sure they were playing me, you know, because the word was out that Mr. Kammer was trying to help. But I had some guys who had done some very bad things in my office crying because they could not catch a break. They got a police record, an arrest record, a conviction record, a jail record. They went to school in a lousy high school. They didn't finish because they couldn't see any opportunity there. So they were told that they were shit. And how do I not be shit? Well, I'm a man, so I guess I've got to have some money. I mean, we need to recognize as a culture that a man without money is in a very different position than a woman without money. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to jail. I mean, I'm going to risk going to jail so that I can not be shit. I'm going to have some money. I'm going to be somebody. The impact of being male on a marginalized Black person, you know, it's not pretty. It's not easy, especially when you keep hearing the culture keeps saying, "Oh, it's a man's world," and what kind of a man are you? You know, that you can't make a living and support your kids. So, you know, the war on poverty basically fired men or laid them off. Basically, we don't really need you. We're going to focus on supporting women and children. And I also worked for National Fatherhood Initiative for a year. And my job there was to work largely with prison systems around the country, state prison systems, some local jails and county systems, talking about the NFI, National Fatherhood Initiative product called Inside Out Dads. It was a program for incarcerated fathers about how to maintain their relationships with their kids while they were locked up. And so, you know, you might ask, well, you know, why was the warden, why was the superintendent of this prison system interested in spending thousands and thousands of dollars and staff time to run this program for these quote unquote thugs, these bad guys? these maggots, criminals. It's because if you want to reach a man's heart, you reach him through his kids. And the prison systems know that when a man feels his heart and has a reason to try to do right and get out and live a straight life so he can have a family and be who he really wants to be, not who, the bling and the media and the hype tell him he's supposed to be as a man, because as a man, you gotta be tough, you gotta be bad, you gotta have sex with a lot of women, you gotta have a lot of money, all that crazy stuff. That's very much a part of what Black men are hearing. And it's rough. It's hard.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about that. Nobody. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not the only person talking about it, but I'm the only one who can talk about it freely without being worried about being fired.
Right.
or losing my government funding. But we got to. So our approach to the war on poverty, our approach to poverty, our approach to our social problems has been thoroughly wrong, because Black men are not the problem. Black men are half the solution. And we got to get on with that.
Well, the world, we need to wake up to the fact that this problem is so complex that we need to reach out to other groups. We need to reach out to other, the males and the females and the Blacks and the Hispanics, the Latinos. There's this huge machine that we have that's just running, and it was built wrong. And I hate to say, because people take it so wrong. When you talk about defunding the police, they immediately jump to the conclusion of what you mean. When I say we need to dismantle the system, I don't mean we need to blow it up. I don't mean we need to stop it. I mean, we need to start making adjustments in the system that is fairer to everyone. And Lalo and I talk about it almost every podcast. Economic disparity is the cause of all of this. And the power structure and the power struggle to keep that economic disparity in place, even, it may not be on purpose, but we're built and we are steered by the media and we are steered by our families and we are steered by everyone to keep the Black men over here, the Hispanic men over here, the Black women over there, and everybody has these dissenting opinions about the system and about each other that we need to just fucking stop, man. We need to stop and start looking at each other and say, and you're exactly right, Jack. We need to stop and say, okay, we've incarcerated how many Black men, and we cannot see that that's a problem. So instead of saying, well, the problem is not the system, the problem is the Black man. No, it is not. The problem is the system and the point in time where you have incarcerated so many people. You need to look at what you've done and say, okay, we are wrong here. We got to do something different, or otherwise this system it's groaning under its own pressure right now. We got to do something different.
I really have come to agree with your point over the past couple of years that income inequality is the acid that is eating away at the mortar of our society.
Yeah.
Because the number one thing that people need to know or to feel, if you want them to play ball with you, if you want them to participate in the game, in the system, in the machine that has been set up, they need to know that the rules are fair, that the game is fair. And you look at growing income inequality, and it really does look like it's not looking out for making sure the people at the bottom get to feel good about their situation. They got to feel like they're being screwed. And I think they do. And then, you look again, who's at the bottom of the bottom? Yeah. And we really got to do better. On the issue of defunding the police. That is the idea of taking away all of the budget that the police department has is, of course, crazy. And I know that you know that, and that defund police doesn't mean that. It means let's reallocate the funds.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so along with the fact that we need to reform police work, we need to reform social work. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I think police work, especially in big cities, is too white because there's a lot of distrust between urban citizens, urban communities, and police departments. And a large part of that is that it's just too white, and there's too much to distrust. We've seen too many bad situations. More black officers who were willing, to ride with white officers and to show up at a scene with a white officer sort of tells the people, okay, this guy's probably all right. This white guy's probably okay. I can trust him because Officer Jones is saying he's cool and we're going to try to help you here.
But Jack, let me say something here first.
Okay.
When you talk about things like that, and I completely agree. But here's the situation. We've got here in Bakersfield, we've got mostly white police, right, Lalo?
Yeah, it's a very conservative town.
It's very conservative town, lots of white police. You go in the inner cities, lots of white police. You go in the Midwest, lots of white police. The thing is, we built a culture here that the education system favors the white male in this situation for policemen. The economic situation is the white male. You begin to build a white police force that marginalizes black people, then you have less and less and less black people who can enter into the police force, and you've got this disparity. And then everybody's like saying, well, you need more black policemen, you need more Hispanic policemen. Well, you fucking put them all in jail, and then you've given them records, and then you haven't educated them. And how can you expect to bring in black males or black females that aren't there, Jack? We've destroyed their culture.
Well, I didn't say I expected it to happen quickly or that it was going to happen easily. I'm just saying it would be good if police departments had more black folks in them. So the point I was trying to make, the parallel here, is that just as police work is too white, social work is too pink.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, I read that yesterday on your website.
And there is nobody interested in talking about that. We have fabulous programs with lots of government and philanthropic money backing them up to try to help girls and women get into STEM professions, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's great. If there is a social benefit to having more women more involved in building roads and bridges and buildings, there is at least as much social benefit involved in having more men more involved in building families and communities. And nobody is talking about that. Social work is about 88% female, and you couldn't have an influential profession that's 88% female without somebody saying, hey, or 88% male without somebody saying, hey, we need some more females in there.
Right.
But in social work, nobody's talking about it. If you bring it up, what you hear is, oh, men don't care. Men don't want to help anybody. Or, oh, they just like the money. There's not enough money in social work. It's a sort of the situation that we have with women trying to keep men out of the female domain of the family, because social work is very much involved. And I'm not talking about all social workers and all stripes of social work, but the ones who were involved in family support and the ones who were involved in trying to support and help children. social work has a terrible record of not even looking for the father when a kid needs to be taken away from the mother. You know, they'll look at the mother's kin. They might even look at the father's kin, but they're not interested, for the most part, in tapping the value, the love that these men have for their kids. That's just an example of how social work is gender biased. It is enforcing the system of having the female domain primarily driven and run by women who have a small amount of power, but it's enough to make them very happy, and they don't want to give it up. So I have a friend who went through a bad divorce and had to deal with social workers who did custody evaluations for him and his kids and his wife. And he's a professor of history. He refers to social workers as the plainclothes feminist police. The Council on Social Work Education, which is the accrediting body for all schools of social work in North America, or at least in the United States, Council on Social Work Education, every year awards money to the winner of the Feminist Scholarship Program.
Okay.
There is a Feminist Scholarship Award in social work at the highest levels.
Is there a chauvinist one? The chauvinist award for the year?
Yeah. And so, it's all about how men oppress women. And so when a social worker goes into an ambiguous situation involving a man and a woman, well, guess who's right and guess who's wrong? Guess who deserves support and guess who doesn't?
We're not seen as nurturers is the thing. No. We're not.
Right. Only women are.
Well, did you know it's not just social work did you know that only 3% of kindergarten and first grade teachers are males? Did you know that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do know that. I don't know about the exact numbers, but I know that.
No, it's 3%, and it has not changed since 1995.
And you know what one of the problems there is? Another stereotype.
Women as nurturers. I'd say women as nurturers and men are not.
Yes. Can you think of a negative stereotype about men that makes men very reluctant to go into that profession?
Oh,
pedophilia.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that's it. That's exactly right. Why aren't nurturing men welcome in nursery schools or in daycare centers? Because they might have to change a diaper. Oh my God. You know how men are. He'll abuse the child.
Right.
So, we got a few stereotypes about men that we need to sort of get serious about dismantling. And
but do you guys think
how men mansplain? Go ahead, Lalo.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you guys think those disparities are due to men not being pushed out or not being put in those positions? Or do you think it's more due to the fact that men aren't wanting to go into those positions? Bob was talking about, the kindergarten teachers. I know it's very anecdotal and stuff, but I've talked to many people throughout my life and friends and family, and I've never met a guy that's, hey, I want to be a kindergarten teacher. That's my dream job.
Sure. Yes. So let's look at 60 years ago. There weren't many women who wanted to be lawyers. And there were lots of reasons for that, some of which were women had drunk the Kool-Aid and thought, well, I'm a woman. I can't be a strong advocate and argue with people and tell them they're wrong. I just want everybody to like me. That's what women are supposed to do. They should have everybody like them. And not everybody likes lawyers. So, that's one reason I can't be a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer. I'm really not confident that I have what it takes.
But where did that, Kool-Aid come from? Who provided that stereotype? It came from
men wanting to maintain their domain So it served men's hold on the male domain to say women don't have what it takes. And at the same time, today, now, still, we have the female domain and women wanting to maintain the female domain. And so we're perfectly happy having the world believe that women are nurturing and men are not. And a lot of men have drunk the Kool-Aid. I wouldn't know how to handle a baby. So, the stereotypes start and they get embedded and they grow and they enmesh and intertwine, and people respond accordingly. Also, it's true that nursery school teachers aren't going to make a lot of money, but if you're the kind of person who really likes kids, you might love being a nursery school teacher for 3, 4, 5, 6 years while you're young. Don't need to make a lot of money. But can't really make a career of it because, you're a man. You got to get serious about making some money so you can support a family.
Oh, you just hit the nail on the head right there, Jack. You got to get serious, and that's not a serious profession. And you know what? It's one of our most important. It's a bedrock of our culture. When you bring your kids into the education system, they should see diversity. They should see men and women and black men and black women and Hispanics. They should see that.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Hear, hear.
Yeah,
Hear, hear.
I think my main concern or my main issue is it seems like a lot of this stems heavily from like stereotypes, like you guys are talking about women being, the caretakers and, men being the providers. And my issue with that, with everything kind of stemming from that is, where does those stereotypes come from? And I mean, I haven't like super, delved into it before, but I have a feeling that, if you like, go far back enough, those stereotypes kind of came from, centuries ago where men kind of created that ecosystem where like, hey, you're going to stay home and, raise our kids and take care of the house and whatnot. And, I'll take care of everything else. You just make sure, dinner's on the table by the time I get home. And it kind of, ended up, putting us where we are today.
Okay, so I would say the origin of stereotypes is that necessity is the mother of invention. Stereotypes serve a purpose. Stereotypes serve a purpose. The stereotype that men aren't nurturing, that men are violent, is still serving the purpose of keeping men out of the female domain in anywhere near the numbers that women have entered the male domain. Now, I think you're right, Lalo, that it does go way back. Our evolutionary psychology goes way back to when it was important for us to harness every teeny tiny bit of advantage we could when we were living on the brink of extinction.
Like hunter-gatherers type stuff.
Yeah, the men needed to be the ones who weren't worried about, feeding the baby. They were the ones who were interested in going out and hauling the big hunk of meat back so that, occasionally the tribe could have some meat. The women,
Right.
Of course, were able to take the baby on their hip when they were out gathering the nuts and the berries. So, yeah, these things started from reality. I mean, people didn't just make them up willy-nilly. They served a purpose. What happened between then and now, though, is that we've created civilization. And it's not really so necessary that men be thinking about how well they can throw a spear and hit a woolly mammoth. So, we have a lot more flexibility in our lives, and women have demanded flexibility in their lives because civilization doesn't require them to stay with babies on their hip all day.
Right.
And we haven't done anything nearly comparable to open up opportunities and options for the way men get to live their lives.
Nice.
But because I mean, I've worked like I worked for the CPS department here in Bakersfield for a little over a year. So, you know, I understand and I see that disparity that favors, you know, the mothers. And I agree that that needs some like major, like you said, reform and overhauling. But like you just mentioned, men don't really have that freedom of living their lives the way that they want. Because I mean, apart from that system, you know, the foster care system and, you know, the custody battles and, you know, the whole family court system, like in what other ways do you think men are being, you know, deprived of that freedom of living their lives the way that they want?
Well,
because I personally don't see many, you know.
okay, so let me help you here. One is that we don't get to live as long. You know, for 7 years, typically, men are dead while women are still living. That's kind of a limitation on how you live your life if you're dead. The federal government has, I think it is 7 offices on women's health, 0 offices on men's health. That's probably something that ought to change. That's pretty big. That's pretty important. In criminal court, men will get stronger and longer sentences than women will. If you're in jail, you know, if you get a longer sentence, it's because you're deemed to be not worthy of having other options in your life other than to be in jail. That's pretty important. That's pretty significant. But then, you know, just on a fundamental everyday level, if you were to be driving down the road and you see somebody fixing a flat tire, and it's a man, you're probably just going to keep right on driving because you assume, well, he's good with, you know, he's a man, so he doesn't need any help. If it's a woman, you're more likely to stop. Now, that's just an example of, you know, the ready belief that men don't need help. And that occurs in innumerable ways. Not only that men don't need help, men don't deserve help. Because men have set up this system for their own selfish purposes. And if they've got a problem, well, they probably caused it. Now, you know, you referred, Lalo, a little while ago to how men set up the system. Okay, maybe men did set up the system, but that doesn't necessarily suggest or imply or prove that men set up the system for themselves. I mean, I will buy the idea that, sure, we could argue that we live in a patriarchy, but all patriarchy says is that men are the ones making the decisions. It doesn't say what is driving their decisions and what are they trying to decide on. You know, the men in Congress are not there to take care of other men. The men in Congress are there to try to take care of much more than men, women and children. You know, the biggest, to me, I would love to knock down the patriarchy if we could replace it with something other than feminism. But to me, the worst part of patriarchy, the worst problem of patriarchy is that the last thing that patriarchal men in patriarchal traditional positions of power can talk about is their own problems. The last thing men can talk about is their own problems. Why don't men talk? Because we don't really want to hear. We don't want to hear about your problems. You need to listen to us talk about our problems.
Well, I think part of that also has to do with men don't want to appear weak.
Right.
Because I think when you talk about your problems or
where'd that
your
come
emotions.
From? Where did that come from? Where did it come from that men are not allowed to be human? to acknowledge that they've got vulnerabilities, things that they're scared of, afraid of, not confident about.
Well, I think a lot
Where
of
did
that
come
comes. I
from?
think a lot of that comes from, that, like you said, the patriarchy of men being the providers. Like, hey, I can't cry, I can't ask for help. I have to do everything myself because I'm the provider.
Okay. Have you ever talked to a therapist who has told you, or who would tell you, I have, that women often say they want men to express their vulnerability, but somewhere deep inside, probably going back to the grasslands of Africa, they don't want to hear that the man is afraid or worried or unsure or uncertain. They want to hear him say, oh, no problem, baby. Come with me. Got you taken care of. Things are great. Couldn't be better. That's a mask, right? We got to wear.
And it's a failure. It's a failure when we do. That's the thing.
Exactly. Of course, because it denies us our humanity.
And there's that duality, Jack, and it shows up in not just that, but if you go back and you look what we were talking about earlier about that male dominant culture that we say we don't want, and then simultaneously we say we do want, because we will say I hate male chauvinists, and then a show will come on HBO like Mad Men, which features a male chauvinist, and we're drawn to him. And it's that duality that we have. Is like, I want what I don't want. And that's so fucking confusing to men. And I've been in this situation. I'm 56 years old. I've been in this situation all my life of trying to figure out what to be. And like I said, I ended up in therapy because I had no idea what to do or what to say or what not to say or what to think or what not to think. And I got to this point where I became weak and I broke down. And when I broke down and I went to an emergency mental health clinic, I felt like a failure at that point.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking about this. Men need to hear a strong man like you talking about what it was like when they weren't feeling so strong.
Yeah, it's frightening. It because my identity was built in be tough, be strong. I grew up in Appalachia on top of that, and excuse me for saying it, but when they say, I think I need some help, well, you're a pussy. And that's how then I joined the Marine Corps, and I went to the Marine Corps, and here I'm a guy. And I've had that psychological weakness my entire life of not knowing if I was right, and being afraid and being fearful and crying off to the side in frustration, and then going right back into the show, right back into the circus of I'm a guy and I'm a Marine and I'm a dad and it finally broke me. And guys, if you're out there and you're listening to me and you feel broken, get some help, man, because you're not broken. You're just confused. You're just hurt. And it's okay. It's okay to do that. It's okay to get help, man. I tell people all the time, it's okay. If you got to go to an emergency mental health clinic or make a phone call to a 1-800 number, get some help, because you're not going to make it on your own. It's as simple as that.
Do you guys believe that, that fear of being like rejected by, society, like Bob just said, he was afraid of people calling him a pussy and, all these things. Do you think that fear is more connected with other men calling you afraid? You don't want to appear weak to other men, around you. Or do you think it's more of, you don't want to appear weak to the women around you? Or do you think it's kind of 50-50?
Guy Lalo, that's an excellent question. And it's the first time I've ever even considered it.
But I think to me, I feel like a lot of guys fear rejection from other men,
Yeah.
friends, their father, especially
Yeah.
in some parts of the country. If you appear weak to your father, they'll disown you, and they'll, oh, you're not my son, things like that.
Right.
Because I mean, when like that, especially when you said that, I was afraid of being called a pussy, that kind of implies that another man told you that,
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that fear also stems from that kind of not wanting to be seen as a weak man to other men,
Right.
Bob, if you would let me, I would like to play a little bit of audio that addresses this question. Lalo, you're certainly right that there are a lot of men who will enforce the idea that you shouldn't be a pussy. It's also true that there are a lot of women who will enforce the idea that you shouldn't be a pussy. And I have a piece of audio that, well, it doesn't look like I can bring it up. It was audio of a woman named Brene Brown, who was at a book signing for one of her books. She's a social worker, very popular among the self-help crowd.
Yes, she is. I know her name.
Yeah. She was at a book signing, signing books for, the book was, I think, I'm not exactly sure what it was about. I mean, I'm not sure what the title was, but it was about showing up and being vulnerable, being human. She tells the story on a radio show called On Being with Krista Tippett. She told the story, and she told the book, and she told the story in one of her books. She said that, first of all, a man came up to her at this book signing. He was standing next to his wife, who presented Brene Brown with 4 copies of her book, and had her sign them for herself, for the mother, and for the 3 daughters. And after the books were signed, the woman said to her husband, who was standing there, "Come on, babe, let's go." And he said, "No, I want to talk to her for a second." And she said, No, come on, let's go. He said, "I'm going to talk to her for a second." And he said to Brene Brown, "So listen, I really liked what you said. I really appreciate the thing about showing up and being there and being vulnerable and being honest, but you didn't talk about men. You didn't mention men." And she said, "Well, I don't study men." And he said, "Oh, well, that's convenient, because the 3 daughters that you just signed the books for, and my wife that you just signed a book for. Before you tell me that the problem I'm going to mention was caused by brothers and mean coaches and other men, you need to know that those women would rather see me fall off my white horse and die. No, they would rather see me die than to see me fall off my white horse."
Yeah.
It's a problem that women help manifest and perpetuate as well. Women want strong men. And it's good for men to want to be strong, but not to be machines. So, it's not something that men do only to other men. It's something that the culture does to us. And the culture did bad things to women too, giving them lots of bad ideas and stupid limitations. But we've dealt with those for 50, 60 years. We haven't done nearly as much for men. I mean, you will still hear, and I will still hear, when I say, I want to talk about sexism against men. I want to talk about biases and stereotypes against men. I still run the risk of hearing some nasty person saying, "Oh, poor baby. What do you want to cry about?" As if men don't run the world. That's still going on. let's get real here. It's not just men doing it to other men. If men could make it stop, they would. It would take some adjustment. You would have to assure them, you mean I can still be a man and not pretend that everything's fine all the time?
Yeah.
I can still be a man and be able to say I'm afraid, or I'm sad, or I'm worried, or I'm feeling like you're going to leave me. And I can express I don't have to be a machine. I'm not a tool at the disposal of other people and the culture. I get to live a life. If you could convince men all of those things, you'd see a lot fewer men saying, "You're a pussy."
Yeah. We need to close up here, Jack. But listen, I want to say this one thing. I want to level the playing field just a little, if you'd let me.
Okay.
When I was at that point of breaking down, and when I was at the point of losing my mind, and you can ask my wife, I was ineffective on almost every aspect of my life because I had let this get to me. I sought out therapy, but let me tell you that the interesting thing here, I sought out a female as a therapist because and it's funny you should mention Brene Brown, because when I was in college studying psychology, and of course you have to take sociology courses, she said something that I read one of her books called The Call to Courage. And it was for women. I understood that, and I had a female teacher, and I was in that place where I had to learn. But she said, you can measure how brave you are by how vulnerable you want to be, and that stuck with me. I mean, that was one of those times in college when I was like, oh my God, this is so true, and it became like a part of my life. And when I broke down and when I became vulnerable, I sought out a woman because I needed her to tell me that I was okay. And I knew that she was going to do that. And I lucked out and got a therapist that was so powerful and so plugged into the situation of my marginalization as a man. And she knew that. And when I explained myself, she brought me back into the arena with the it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to cry. You're still a guy. You're still weightlifting, and you're still an ex-Marine, and you're still jumping out of airplanes, and you're still a rock climber, and you're still all these things that you feel like masculinity is, whether you're right or wrong. But it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to go to your wife and say, I'm not feeling well mentally. I need some help. And we need women, and women need us. And that's my point. And that's what I'd love to close with today, Jack. We need each other, man. We need to stop fighting,
Can I give an endorsement to what you just said?
Sure.
You remember that when a few minutes ago, I said, I'm not talking about every kind of social worker. I'm talking about the kind who deal with disputes between fathers and mothers and supporting families. The kind of social workers that you dealt with, the ones who go into clinical social work, was she a social worker or a therapist or a psychologist?
Therapist. She was MFT, marriage and family therapist.
Okay. Yeah. So she wasn't a social worker, but the point is still valid. There are a lot of good female social workers who are clinical, and you are not alone. Lots of men will prefer talking to a female counselor.
Yeah.
Most women will seek a female. Some men will seek a male, but also many men will seek a female. And you get a good woman who understands what's going on because they see how men's lives are so different from women's lives. That can be a very good thing. So Yes. My reservations about social workers are not directed towards clinicians.
Cool. All right.
Very good.
Hey,
Good for you.
yeah. It's been an enlightening, I guess it's been about 7 years now, but feeling a lot better, you know?
Good for you. Good for you. Maybe we shouldn't raise another topic, but let me just ask a quick question.
Sure.
And it might help some men out there. How close did you get to suicide?
That is something that I considered when I was younger. But as I'm one of those thrill seekers, Jack, and I like to do things that I think I built almost a suicide mentality into my life for the longest time. I would do the thing, drive fast and climb high and climb without ropes and jump out of airplanes and join the Marine Corps. So I think that because of my childhood, because of the way I grew up in an authoritarian household, I'm not, how can I say it? I'm not openly suicidal, but I think for the longest time in my life, I was like, I didn't give a fuck, whatever. If I die, I die, you know, and I still feel that way because I'm still doing the same stuff at age 56 that I know I shouldn't be doing, but I like my life now. Let's say that. I like my life. I love my life. So, and that's why Lalo and I do this podcast. I think that's like what Lalo and I chose each other. He's a much younger man. I'm an older guy. We have that we see life from two different aspects. And we're not saying we're correct. And in fact, you know, our podcast says we could be thoroughly wrong here, but we want to open up these conversations. We want to open up these conversations and let men talk and let women talk and let Black people talk and let Hispanics talk. We need to open up this conversation, you know, not just nationwide, but worldwide, but we need to start in our own households. People say we need to start in our neighborhoods. No, sir. We need to start in our households, and this conversation can grow out from that. And that's what we're trying to do here. And man, I really appreciate you having you on. When I go back over this podcast and I listen to it, there's lots of points here that I'd like to continue talking about. If you'd like to come on at a later time, would love to have you back.
I would love to be on your show again.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, man. I'm going to mute you because I want to talk to you after the podcast for just a second. So we're going to close this up.
Thanks. Take care.
All right. All right, Lalo, what do you think, man?
That was really good.
Yeah. Let's have him back on.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of things were said here that were explained. So if you got a problem with it, let's hear it, but let's hear it in a logical manner. If you have some pushback, please do. If you have some questions, please send them to us. We'll get them back to Jack. We'll have him back on. And, man, I'm enlightened today, dude. Feel good.
I was going to say, I think, Jack did a really good job at, I think one of the issues that we face a lot when discussing, you know, any issue is, you get a lot of that, hey, you know, someone shows they present their argument, you know, and then the other person's response is like, okay, but these are my issues, you know, almost in a way to kind of like you're competing like, oh, who has the bigger problems, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's not really going to solve anything. I think the correct way is, hey, we have this problem and we have this problem. I think at the very beginning, he made that very like, he made that a point of emphasis, you know? It's like, it's not, oh, you know, you have your issues, but I also have mine. It's you have your issues and I have mine, you know? So you could actively solve both of them at the same time and not just one or the other. It's not, oh, we have to fix one this or that. It's we can fix this and that.
Wow. You know, isn't that beautiful, man? I mean, it's just changing the language just a little bit. And that's what this is about. It's about changing the dialogue, changing the way we think about things, instead of saying, oh, you got problems? Well, fuck you. Look at my problems. And that's a cool way to say, you have problems? I know. I see your problems. And here, here's mine that are coming up also. Maybe we can solve this together, because my problem is creating your problem, or your problem is creating mine. So let's talk about this. Beautiful, man.
I think that's the right path to go down.
All right, man.
You're looking to solve them.
Perfect. You know what? Have a good week, Lalo.
You too, man.
It was good talking to you, and it was great talking to Jack. It's been the Thoroughly Wrong Project, and just like I said, just remember, everything you heard here today, we could be thoroughly fucking wrong too, man. I'll see you next week, bro.
Later, man.
Later. You have now experienced the Thoroughly Wrong Project with your podcast hosts, Lalo and Bob. We can now be found on Pandora Radio, Apple Podcasts, Podium Podcast, or by searching the Thoroughly Wrong Project to locate our YouTube channel. You can contact us directly by email at thoroughly-wrong@gmail.com, or just leave a comment on any of our platforms. Until next time, thanks for spending your valuable time with us, and remember, always speak up and never be afraid to be thoroughly wrong.